It was a gray, rainy afternoon in downtown Houston, the kind of weather that usually goes unnoticed by patients inside St. Jude Memorial Hospital, a place where the ticking of IV pumps, whispered prayers, and soft lullabies blend into one quiet symphony of hope and heartbreak. Somewhere on the fourth floor, in the pediatric oncology unit, a little girl named Ava sat in bed. She was 8 years old, with eyes too tired for her age, and a smile that rarely left her face, even after months of grueling chemotherapy. Her mother, Rachel, sat beside her, combing what remained of her daughter's hair while pretending not to cry. What they didn't know was that downstairs, at the hospital's side entrance, a black Tesla Model S had just pulled up. No entourage, no camera crew, no press releases, just one man stepping out quietly in jeans and a black hoodie, hood low, hands in pockets, head slightly down. Security recognized him immediately, Elon Musk, but he had made one thing clear to the staff ahead of time. No announcements, no photographers. I'm not here for press. I'm just here. The hospital administrator, a man named Dr. Stein, met him at the door. "Mr. Musk," he said nervously, "we're honored, but may I ask, why here? Why now?" Elon didn't answer immediately. He simply looked up at the floors above them. His voice was low. "Because not everything I do needs a headline. Someone wrote me a letter." And with that, he stepped inside, walking the sterile hallways like a quiet visitor, not a billionaire. Nurses whispered, glancing up in disbelief. Some paused mid-step. Others chose not to say anything at all, because in that moment, he wasn't Elon Musk, the CEO. He was just a man on a mission, and he was about to enter the room of a little girl whose life he was about to change forever. 3 weeks earlier, a letter had arrived at the SpaceX office in Hawthorne, California. It wasn't typed. It wasn't addressed by a publicist or agent. It was handwritten on pink stationery with tiny stars drawn around the edges. The envelope read simply, "To Elon Musk, the Rocket Man." Most letters like this never made it to Elon's desk, but something about this one stopped his assistant in her tracks. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written by a child who had to rest her hand several times. Inside was a message that would linger with Elon long after he read it. "Dear Mr. Musk, my name is Ava. I'm 8. I have cancer. The doctors say I might not get better, but I love space. I watch your rocket launches with my mom. I like to pretend I'm inside the rocket, flying away from hospitals and needles. One day, I want to see a rocket launch in person, but if I can't, I hope you'll think of me next time you go to space. Maybe even write my name on a rocket. That would make me feel like I flew too. Love, Ava." Elon had read that letter 3 times, each time slower than the last. He didn't show it to the press. He didn't tweet about it. He didn't even mention it to his board. He simply asked his team to find her. No PR, no charity stunt, just a quiet mission. Now, as he stood outside room 408, he held that same letter in his jacket pocket. A nurse gave a gentle knock before opening the door. Inside, Ava looked up from a coloring book. Her eyes widened. "Hi," Elon said, stepping forward. "You must be Ava." She blinked, unsure whether to smile or cry. "Are you the Rocket Man?" He nodded. "I am, and I came because I got your letter." Ava's mother gasped softly. Her hand flew to her mouth. She hadn't known. No one had. Elon pulled the pink envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. "I brought this with me. I don't know if I can write your name on a rocket." He paused, kneeling beside her bed. "But I can do something better." The next morning, SpaceX's design floor wasn't buzzing with the usual technical chatter. Engineers weren't hunched over mock-ups of fuel injectors or telemetry diagrams. Instead, they gathered around a small conference room monitor where Elon Musk stood, holding Ava's letter in one hand and a prototype schematic in the other. "I want her name on Falcon 9, he said simply. "But not just the name. I want her story inside that rocket." A few eyebrows raised. Elon was known for big ideas, but this one, This felt different. He didn't speak like a CEO. He spoke like a man on a mission. "We'll build a custom payload capsule. Inside, we'll include a memory card. On it, her letter, her drawings, maybe even a voice message if her mom agrees. And I want the words 'Ava flew here' engraved on the side." A silence fell over the room. Then one by one, heads began to nod, not out of obligation, but something deeper. No sponsor, no camera crew, no investors. Just a little girl's dream taking shape in the minds of some of the smartest people on Earth. By the end of the day, the mission had a name, Project Ava. Behind the scenes, Elon made another quiet move. He called the children's hospital, not with questions, but with an offer. Full coverage of Ava's remaining treatment and a dedicated fund in her name to support other kids in similar conditions. "No media," he told the hospital director. "Just make sure she's okay." That night in his private office, he replayed a voice memo sent from Ava's mom. It was short, barely 15 seconds long, but it carried the weight of 1,000 speeches. She said when she closes her eyes now, she sees the stars again. "Thank you." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat back, looked at the early renderings of the custom payload capsule, and smiled. Not his usual smirk. This one was softer. This wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about legacy. This was about one girl, a sky full of stars, and the man who decided to send her name to meet them. Weeks passed, and what began as a quiet gesture within SpaceX quickly became something larger than anyone anticipated. Project Ava, still unannounced to the public, was moving at a pace few missions ever had. Engineers volunteered overtime without being asked. Designers reworked payload schematics with a level of care typically reserved for manned flights. And in the heart of the Mission Control Center, Elon Musk watched every piece fall into place with a rare mix of urgency and reverence. The capsule itself was finished first, sleek, light, and embedded with a digital vault that could withstand re-entry temperatures and high-altitude radiation. Inside, Ava's letter was etched onto a titanium plate, her shaky handwriting preserved forever. Her voice, recorded in a quiet hospital room on her better days, was sealed inside a memory chip, along with a drawing of a rocket with stars and a stick-figure girl waving at the sky. Elon didn't speak much about it, even to close colleagues. When asked why he was diverting resources from commercial launches, he'd simply respond, "This one matters." It was the kind of conviction that didn't need convincing. Meanwhile, Ava's condition worsened. Treatments continued, and though her spirit was as fiery as ever, doctors had begun to gently prepare her mother for what might come. Yet every day, when they wheeled her to the window overlooking the city skyline, she'd ask the same question, "Is my rocket almost ready?" And then it was. Falcon 9's next mission was reassigned. Originally meant to carry a cluster of satellites into low Earth orbit, the payload was reduced, adjusted, and renamed. The new title, submitted quietly to the FAA AV9, Elon visited Ava the night before the launch. No press, no assistance, just him, a small bag of mission patches, and a pre-recorded video showing the capsule being secured to the rocket. She reached for the screen with trembling fingers, her eyes wide. "That's really mine," he nodded. "It's yours, Ava. Tomorrow morning the world's going to watch your story lift off." She didn't cry, she just whispered, "Then I'm going to space, aren't I?" Elon smiled. "Yeah, you are." At dawn the next day, launch pads glowed under the soft hues of a Florida sunrise. Reporters arrived to cover what they thought was a standard Falcon 9 liftoff. But when they saw the name painted along the side, AV9, Ava flew here, questions buzzed like static in the air. Then the story broke. A child, a letter, a billionaire, and a launch unlike any other. Millions tuned in. Hospital wards across the country wheeled in TVs. Children in beds and wheelchairs watched with eyes wide. Ava, surrounded by nurses and her mom, held Elon's hand and counted down with the mission control feed. 3, 2, 1, ignition. The rocket lifted into the sky, trailing light and fire. In its shadow there was no applause, just awe, just silence. Just a little girl staring upward, watching her name break through the clouds. As the rocket disappeared into the atmosphere, carrying with it the tiny capsule named after a child most of the world had never heard of, the silence in the room where Ava lay turned into something sacred. Not the kind of silence that comes from sorrow, but the breathless stillness that follows something beautiful, something historic. Her tiny hand, wrapped around her mother's fingers, trembled with joy. Elon Musk remained beside her hospital bed for several minutes, watching the telemetry feed on a monitor across the room. "Stage separation confirmed," came the voice from Mission Control. "Trajectory nominal, capsule AV9 en route to orbit." Ava's eyes glistened. "Did I do it?" Elon turned to her and nodded slowly. "You did, kiddo. Your letter's up there now, floating above the world." But what no one expected, what even Elon hadn't planned for, was how the story would spread. By the time the rocket reached orbit, Ava flew. Here was trending in over 30 countries. The original post from SpaceX's account had already crossed 3 million retweets. People weren't just sharing it, they were crying with it. Teachers played the launch in classrooms. News anchors struggled to hold composure as they told viewers about a girl who wrote to the stars and the billionaire who listened. What made it more powerful wasn't just the act, it was the simplicity of it. No press conference, no branded merchandise, no publicity tour, just a promise made to a little girl and a mission that spoke louder than any speech ever could. NASA issued a rare public commendation, stating that space had never been so deeply human. A senator from Ohio, holding back tears on C-SPAN, said, "This is the kind of leadership that transcends politics." People sent thousands of letters and drawings to SpaceX, asking if they too could send messages to space. Parents of sick children wrote long handwritten notes thanking Elon for showing their kids that dreams weren't just for the healthy or the privileged. They were for anyone with the courage to ask. But amid the storm of attention, Ava's room remained quiet. She wasn't watching the news. She wasn't thinking about hashtags or headlines. She was just lying in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding the SpaceX patch Elon had given her, whispering to no one in particular, "I went to space today." Later that evening, as the sun set, Elon stood on the hospital rooftop alone. He looked toward the sky, where the capsule orbited above, invisible to the naked eye but alive in the hearts of millions. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't think about colonizing Mars, or quarterly earnings, or launching new satellites. He thought about a little girl and a letter, and how sometimes the smallest things reach the farthest. What the world didn't know, what even the press hadn't picked up on yet, was that Elon Musk had added something else to the capsule. It wasn't in any of the official briefings or technical manifests. It wasn't discussed with engineers or mentioned during the pre-launch checks. In fact, the file had been encrypted and slipped into the onboard data core the night before launch by Elon himself. Only a handful of SpaceX insiders knew about it, and they weren't talking. Inside the AV9 capsule, orbiting silently above Earth, floating in zero gravity, along with Ava's physical letter, was a small device no larger than a flash drive. It contained a 2-minute video file. The title? To Future Ava. The contents had been recorded by Elon in the privacy of his Austin home long after everyone had left. A single camera, a dimly lit room. His voice, uncharacteristically soft. "Hey Ava," he began, looking directly into the lens. "If you're seeing this, it means you're older now, maybe healthy, maybe still fighting, but alive and curious." He paused. "I just wanted you to know. You made history. People don't remember the details of rockets or satellites. They remember moments that moved them, and you moved the world." He smiled faintly. "I've launched hundreds of payloads into orbit, but this one mattered more than any of them." Then, as if breaking from the script, his voice cracked just slightly. "You reminded me what it's all for." The file closed with an image of the AV-9 capsule spinning gently over Earth's blue curve. At the end, a timestamp, March 29th, 2025, and beneath it, a single line of text, "To the bravest astronaut who never left her bed." The media would eventually uncover this payload months later, after a leak from a European ground station that had intercepted the capsule's data signal. When the video went public, it didn't just go viral. It changed things. Late-night hosts, celebrities, even political rivals of Musk's stood up and applauded him. But back in that hospital, Ava still didn't know any of that. She simply stared out the window from her bed, knowing something big had happened, but not understanding the full reach of it. Not yet. In her hand, she clutched a little paper card that came with a pin from Elon. It read, "Dear Ava, this world is lucky you wrote to it." Elon. And outside that room, the world kept watching the skies, waiting to see what a child would inspire next. The news spread faster than light, or so it felt. Within hours of the capsule's successful orbit confirmation, headlines exploded across every major network. But what took the world's breath away wasn't the launch. It was the story behind it. First came the press conferences. SpaceX executives, blindsided by the sudden emotional attention, confirmed the authenticity of the girl's letter. Then came Elon's team, who quietly admitted there had been a private payload on board. The encrypted file, once locked away by Elon himself, was now being streamed on every platform from YouTube to CNN. People watched in silence as Elon's voice echoed from space. "You reminded me what it's all for." Social media didn't just explode, it wept. Millions of parents, teachers, survivors, children, everyone shared Ava's story, not because she was famous, but because she was real. And in her quiet courage, she had cracked something open in the public's heart. Within 24 hours, over 120 million people had watched the clip. In 72 hours, the For Ava movement began. Hospitals renamed their pediatric oncology wards after her. NASA posted a photo of the AV-9 gliding over the Atlantic with the caption, "You don't need to fly to change the sky." In a surprise appearance on a global broadcast, Elon himself, usually terse, controlled, even aloof, sat with tear-filled eyes and spoke a single sentence. "She reminded me that even the smallest voice can echo through the stars." That week, Ava's hospital received over 400,000 letters and gifts. And for once, Ava smiled. Not because she was famous, but because her letter, once whispered into the unknown, had finally been heard. Doctors still weren't sure about the future. Her condition remained serious, but something had changed. There was color in her cheeks, a sparkle behind tired eyes, and more than anything, there was hope, not just for her, but for every child who felt small and unheard. Outside her hospital room, the sidewalk was covered in chalk messages. "Fly high, Ava. You touched the sky for all of us." One letter, one girl, one orbit. Endless hearts moved. And as the AV-9 capsule completed its third orbit over Earth, silently carrying her words through the stars, Ava rested peacefully, knowing that she mattered, that she was heard, and that somehow, with a crayon and courage, she'd changed the world.